Freda, you're muted.
I was saying, Molly, did you want me to kick it off? Or are you
Oh, yes. Yep, go right ahead.
Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm Freda Eisenberg, and I'm the Commissioner of Planning and Community Development and Environmental Management at Sullivan County. And this meeting is the first in a series of public outreach meetings that we are doing for a grant we received from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation to prepare a watershed management plan for the Neversink River watershed. This is really the first time the county or planning division is making a foray into watershed management planning, so we are really excited. As I mentioned, the project is funded by a grant, which is covering both the development of this plan, but also some capital improvements, which is always really exciting to pair the conceptualizing and the thinking and the dreaming and the planning with actual work on the ground. And this grant from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation covers both. We're obviously grateful for the support from NFWF, but also to our project partners, which helped us apply for this funding and to secure it, and who are also helping us execute some of the project tasks. So I'm just going to kick off the meeting tonight by introducing the project team, just give you a little bit of background on what's going to go on over the next few months, and then I'll hand it over to our speakers. So the project team is out in full force tonight. One of our speakers is Heather Jaxie, who works in my division at the county as chief planner, and she'll be speaking later on in the program. Friends of the Upper Delaware is significant partner, and we have on the Zoom tonight Jeff Skelding, who's the executive director, Sherry Resty Thomas, who's the deputy director, Molly Oliver, policy director, who was setting up the Zoom, as you see here, Rochelle Dufton, administrative coordinator, Jillian Pagnotti, who's their watershed program coordinator, and Kylie Romnowski, who's our grants coordinator, and all of them are working on this project. We're really grateful for their support and partnership. And then our other partner in this is Trout Unlimited. We have Tracy Brown, restoration manager, and Jesse Vidala, engagement coordinator. And Trout Unlimited in particular, Friends of the Upper Delaware is helping us with the planning aspects, and Trout Unlimited is helping us with the actual implementation, a lot of which will be centered on culvert assessment and improvement. So I'd also like to acknowledge on the Zoom tonight, we have one of our legislators from Sullivan County, Alan Sorensen. So as I mentioned, this is the first in a series of meetings, and they'll take place in kind of three batches. The first batch is meant to provide some background on watersheds and how they function. It's more of an educational focus. And as you'll hear tonight, you'll hear presentations on watershed planning, how flooding and streams work, and the impacts that flooding has in our community. The full component of that will unroll in 3 Zooms starting tonight and taking place between now and mid-March. Those will all be virtual. In the spring, we'll have a series of meetings that will be in person. They'll be in person because they'll be more interactive. And during that phase, we'll be doing really some intake. The first meetings is education, where we speak to you. The second batch is we really want to hear from you. There'll be interactive exercises with maps, really to try and identify what some of the issues are in the watershed. And then finally, in the fall, we'll be back on Zoom to present and review and discuss drafts of the plan. So I think, as you've all noticed a few minutes ago, the meeting is being recorded, and it will be available on the Friends of the Upper Delaware website. We'll try and make this available on the county planning website as well. If you'd like to share it with your neighbors to help spread the word and get this going. We'd ask if everyone will hold their questions to the end, or if you have something burning and you don't want to forget it, please type it into the chat box, and the panelists will get to them at the end of the program. And we really do want to get as many people involved in this effort as possible. So help us spread the word. Feel free to invite anyone that you feel might be interested to the next sessions, and obviously let them know that these videos of the Zooms will be out there. And now I see on my screen that George Schuyler, who is the director of the Nature Conservancy and will kick off this panel, I believe is at least on my screen, is front and center. So I will hand this off to him, and thank you, George.
All right, let me share my screen. So this is a bit of a homecoming for me. I spent the first third of my career working on the Neversink back before there was such a vibrant community around it. So this warms my heart immensely. I'm going to give you, I'm kind of the hype man for this. I'm going to give you kind of an overview of water and watersheds, but from the amazing uniqueness they present and the challenges they present and we present in them. So let's see here. So we often hear this phrase, water is life. And I kind of want to underscore this because it's really central to the reason why we should plan at a watershed scale and with as many of us at the table, so to speak, as possible. So think of it this way, when astronomers look for life on other planets or in other galaxies, they look for the presence of water. That is how fundamental it is, which is kind of not surprising, but we forget that sometimes. And we all have heard that our bodies are 70% water, the earth is roughly 70% water, but that thin film, it is not like it's a watery ball, that thin film, if it were a puddle, if it was a puddle the size of a football field, it would be an inch deep. That thin film supports an amazing array of life, from blue-spotted sunfish that you will see in the Neversink watershed, to an amazing collection of insects and dragonflies, which the Neversink also has some really rare species that are found a few places else, to freshwater mussels, which is where I started my career, amazing invertebrates that are filter feeders that are part of that stream ecosystem. And all of that water kind of fuels our life, from providing water supply to enable us to have agriculture, to all of the things that it does, from recreation to religious purposes to recreational opportunities, fishing, hunting. It is an amazing integrator, and it makes possible all of the things that happen in our watershed and other watersheds. And kind of water is unique in a certain way in that there's a lot of water, but if you think about it and you balled it up into one ball, that medium-sized ball to the right of the earth is all the water put in one sphere. There's a tiny pinprick to the right of that. That is the fresh water that is available. That is the stuff that we drink, the fish live in. And in fact, it is 0.5% of the water that is on the planet Earth. So that's kind of unique piece one. It's really limited. It's a rare resource. And peak number two is that all the water that is all the water that has ever been. We're kind of drinking dinosaur pee, and I know that's repulsive, but it has been recycled for billions of years. So it's limited, and we keep reusing it if we take care of it. The third thing is that water has this amazing property of the water that you touch is the last of what has passed and the first of what is yet to come. It is this conveyor belt. We don't operate, or water doesn't exist kind of in a place that is static, or we don't affect water in a place that is static. It is going to be somebody else's water, and somebody else's water is going to become our water. It has the water cycle, which we all learned about at some point in our lives. And it's not just this simple cycle, which kind of makes it really undermines it. It is a system. And so that system is not just a conveyor belt of single main channel stuff happening. It is this beautiful tree where small streams feed together to make bigger streams, which feed together to make bigger streams, which head all the way to the ocean. And that dendritic pattern makes it complicated because it's not just in one place, it's in all places, and all of our activities affect it. And even more complicated, the headwaters in the mountains where it's steep and rushing are really different from the low elevation floodplains, different from the estuary. And if you think about like what happens in those places, we placed mill dams and we fished in the mountain creeks. We grew agriculture in those floodplains and those low-lying areas, and fisheries happened out in the ocean or out in the estuaries. And so our patterns of use are dictated by this physical diversity of river basins. And to add complexity on top of that, we can see biologically that the simple communities of leaves and darterfish and dacefish and brook trout that are in the Catskills give way to increasing complex systems as they go downstream, different types of insects that chew different types of leaves, more diversity of fish until you get to all the way to the bottom of the Neversink. And chemically it changes too. Cold, lots of oxygen, to slower and warmer and lower oxygen levels, more suspended sediments. And so this is a continuum, and this is it brings with it everything that it's passed over and passed through, including those tributaries on the side. It also isn't just this linear conveyor belt. It moves from side to side with its meanders, but also its floodplain. And so it's not in one predictable channel, it moves, and that presents challenges to people who live riverside or want to live riverside or businesses. And in fact, I was just thinking about it. If you've ever driven by that lower Neversink, and then I see Grace Woodard on the line, that lower Neversink where all those farms are, that isn't a current floodplain, but it was a historic and ancient floodplain. That's where the river moved and used to flood and meander back and forth. And you can see the dynamism of a river as it goes. And to add complexity on top of complexity, it's never the same river twice. April showers bring May flowers. That flows that are highs and floody all the way to the droughts and dry periods in the dog days of summer are not only how the river moves, but those are how some animals and plants evolve to their life histories, as also how we have kind of planned out our planting cycles, our operational cycles, our recreational opportunities. And so it's that timing piece that goes along with the river's physical diversity and physical movement. And as I said, each of that timing brings a different cue to whether it's shad migrating upstream or riverbank rare plants blooming or things that are clearing out the fish habitat, especially for trout. And all of this dynamism, this change, this stretchiness of a river makes it really challenging because we are part of the landscape too. From water supplies that we put in. This is a really big one. It's more like New York City's, but it drives the point home that we're accessing the water and our footprints are on the landscape. To agriculture that leaves behind, that clears floodplains, that also leave behind nutrients and bare soils, but also put something back. Power production, maybe not in the Neversink, but in neighboring watersheds, whether it's using the water for cooling and then putting it back in, or it's hydropower. Industry, I just like the beer part because it kind of makes that connection really clear, but industry uses water too and takes it in, uses it, and puts it back in a different condition that the river has to, that the waters have to deal with. And recreational opportunities and fish and wildlife, what in my previous life we used to call biodiversity, but that great diversity of life that depends upon those cues of nature of how much water and what the temperature is and the water quality regime throughout the year naturally. And so we see this integration from the headwaters and their barriers or rolling through farm fields and urban development and bridge abutments and all sorts of things that impact and degrade the water. Water rarely is in better condition when it passes a spot than when it got there. And therein lies the challenge for us.
Hey, George.
And I want to speak, yep.
Hey, George, it's just Jillian. I just wanted to give you a quick heads up. We're at 2 minutes.
Okay, great. More time. So the other part of it is people, and so that people diversity is really is really challenging. Different agencies make different regulations and are responsible for different aspects of the water cycle. Different stakeholders have different uses and different agendas, and none of them talk together. We see conflict around that, and I've seen it lots of times in Deer Park around it because everybody has a different idea of what should happen or what they need. And that's why getting folks together in a plan like this to share their goals, their hopes, their dreams, their needs in the context of a written plan where the plan may go out of date, but it makes clear what people collectively want to happen, and the act of planning builds enough trust and familiarity to be able to start to move projects forwards and move towards a future that we want to see, which is really kind of critical because we see it on our own landscape, from headwater streams to Sullivan County where there's a little more development, to places at the bottom where there ends up being harmful algal blooms or other impacts. Biodiversity loss, which has not gotten better in my 30 years working for the Nature Conservancy, where we lose fish and mussel and dragonfly species. And our waters are not any cleaner. 80% of New York's waters don't meet nitrogen and phosphorus standards. 20% don't have enough water during some times a year. 9 out of 10 of our natural disasters are water related. And so to get there, to get to the future that we strive for, it takes all of us working at the right scale because of that continuum and together, so that enough ideas and agendas and needs are on the table that we can figure out what does a sustainable plan look like? What do we want to improve collectively? And that is the importance to me of getting everybody together and having the stakeholder-driven, stakeholder-based watershed management plan. Thank you.
Awesome, George. Thank you
And
so very
now,
much.
I think I'm going to pass it to Heather, who's
Yep,
going
that's
to
true.
kind of dive into watershed planning.
Yep. So I'm Heather Jackson, and I'm the Chief Planner at Sullivan County Planning. And our work often deals with lot lines created by subdivisions based within municipal borders. And municipal borders, hold on a second, I got the little. Okay. And as you can see, water doesn't care about these lines. And it's often too visible above ground, but you can see that it's also occurring underground. And in fact, it's true of the entire water cycle, that it just doesn't care about our municipal boundaries or our lot lines. And we can have an impact to the entire water cycle. And as George explained so well, you know, our land cover changes incrementally, and that changes the way water flows into and off of a site. What one owner does on his or her property can have impacts on another's property or a public road. Sometimes one project can have a large impact, or it can be a small incremental change that exacerbates a number of other small incremental changes, resulting in a downstream impact. So a watershed plan helps us understand these conditions regionally with on-the-ground information, with science, best management practices, such as field-tested ways to improve the interaction between water and everything that depends on water flowing in a certain way, and what we build. And community input. The plan presents goals to address problems, prevent conflicts, and avoid adverse financial impacts, as you can see here. These could be a number of things too, undersized culverts causing road damage, to an altered water flow that now causes erosion near a pre-existing structure. The plan will be most successful, especially in preventing conflicts, if all stakeholders and perspectives are represented and solutions and ideas are discussed collaboratively, as George pointed out. So it's important to be involved and to get your neighbors involved. So what is our process for putting this plan together? Last summer, interns collected data from over 1,000 culverts throughout the watershed. A bunch of you know about that because we contacted you to let you know that they'd be crawling around your streets. And the GIS modeling, the mapping has begun to help us understand how water is traveling and where it goes. And as Freda mentioned, there will be a series of community outreach events such as this one, explaining the process and the science and gathering ideas and observations and other input from the public to review the plan and ensure the accuracy and inclusivity of the document. So what will the plan look like? Shown here is the general outline of the plan and all the chapters we expect to be fleshed out over the next few months or multiple months. There are sections containing descriptions of the watershed, information on how the plan was created, and other supporting information. In the upcoming months, we'll be looking to the community for help on sections such as a vision statement that will be created in a public forum. Vision statements are broad and idealistic, but should be achievable. The plan is voluntary collaborative document that is aspirational, but not regulatory. There will be goals that support the vision and recommendations that are the action items to help achieve these goals. So depending on the input received, these recommendations could influence regulations, but again, the plan itself is not regulatory. There will be a project list that will include culvert replacement, riparian restoration, and other projects that you all bring to the table. Town supervisors, mayors, planning board members, and highway departments will be involved in the creation of this list too, to maximize success of the plan. And also included in this grant is work specific to the Sullivan O&W Rail Trail, which is exciting to me. We're going to replace some problematic culverts and resurface part of the trail near Woodridge. So these are kind of fun things that we can do, but also this plan is inclusive of things that are more serious. Also part of the plan is a local law and planning review, which will take a look at what is already in place in the policy side of things. This may lead to recommendations about modifying or creating new policy. So some of those policies that are out there, the local ones, your comprehensive plan, open space plans, agricultural plans, of course, your zoning. While all of our communities have comprehensive plans and zoning in place, only some have taken advantage of creating ag plans or open space plans. So all these plans can help guide development and enforce the best management practices to keep impacts of development from crossing those boundaries that water doesn't obey. And some of the goals and recommendations that we come up with may pertain to updates to these documents. From the county side, and equally important, some of the goals and recommendations may alter these plans and policy. Some of the things that we have going on are our resiliency plan. It's currently underway, excuse me, and in the stakeholder interview stage. So right now our consultants are reaching out to the town supervisors and talking with them one-on-one. But if you have specific thoughts on or information about flooding or projects, reach out to our department. A website is being created to inform the public about the process and the plan. And educational opportunities and community input will also be done through that website. But if you want to be on our mailing list, send us an email and we'll put you there and it'll help keep you informed on that. We also have a hazard mitigation plan that was completed at the end of 2021. And we're looking to update it with information from the resiliency plan process. The hazard mitigation plan is a federally mandated plan that should be regularly updated, and all municipalities need to adopt it in order to be eligible for FEMA funding. Again, reach out to us with any information you may have that will inform this process. And then the favorite of many of you on here is our GML 239 reviews. These reviews the county does. It's a state mandated review of local projects that come through the planning boards, zoning boards, and some things that the town boards also approve. If it's triggered by like a county road or a municipal boundary, it comes to the county to be reviewed. And these reviews offer the opportunity to look at projects from the countywide perspective and offer information that a municipal board might not have. Often that information is from these plans. So recommendations that we're going to have in this watershed plan often and projects nearly always come with a price tag. Granted, the upfront cost of being prepared prevents a greater cost later on for fixing or repairing damage. So projects included in plans or supported by plan goals and recommendations have a better chance of getting funded. And this is because it shows that they're part of a bigger vision and they're a priority to the communities. And there may be upcoming funding opportunities, particularly the federal infrastructure bill passed last year. So again, sign up for our email list and keep informed about these opportunities. And of course, there's our email. And I thank you. And I would just want to reinforce that, we're really glad that you're all here tonight, but please share stuff and come out to all of our future events and make sure that your thoughts and ideas are heard. So I'm going to introduce Steve Schwartz, who will go a little bit more into the plan.
Thanks, Heather and George. So my role here is to talk about the visioning process and how we're going to gather input from community stakeholders over the course of the next few months and develop a series of objectives and goals and a vision for the whole plan. And while we're talking about the Never Sink watershed, the idea here is let's broaden it out and let's think about natural communities, human communities, and as well as the hydrological cycle when we talk about the watershed. On the screen, there's a photo that one of our participants took of I believe, a DEC guy fishing in the Never Sink Gorge. This came from Greg Bell Camino. Hi, Greg. And thanks for the photo. I use it pretty often because it's a great photo. So I want to go back to the next slide, back to what is a watershed. A watershed is a region where all of the land drains to a specific point. And the USGS has divided the country up into a bunch of watersheds and then into subwatersheds. And we're focused on the Never Sink watershed, but we're also, so we want to think broadly about the whole watershed, but we also want to invite input down to the smallest level. So on the next page, the image on the left is the entire USGS Huck 10 Never Sink watershed, which starts up in the Catskills and goes down to the Delaware. And then I've zoomed in. So within the Never Sink watershed, there are many of these Huck 12, that's the USGS nomenclature, subwatersheds. This one's the Turner Brook Bushkill watershed. And then on the right side, I've zoomed in so you can see what are called first and second order streams, which are perennial streams that have no feeder. And each of those feeds into a larger stream and then eventually into the subwatershed and then eventually into the Never Sink watershed. So what I invite everyone to do is to think about the vision that we should develop for the entire watershed, entire Never Sink watershed, but also think about where they are and where they recreate and the little tiny streams as well. And we want to think globally in terms of the watershed, and we also want to think locally in terms of the smallest little streams. Next slide, please. Now, we talk about the watershed from a hydrological perspective, that's the definition, but I also like to use this term bioregion. It was invented a long time ago, and it incorporates not only the watershed, but also all of the activities within it, the natural activities, the organic activities, and as well as people and the culture and the history and the use. And so when I think about the watershed, I think of it as a dynamic bioregion. And I think George also touched on this. Next slide, please. There have been a number of watershed management plans on the Neversink, but none have been as comprehensive as we envision this plan to be. There have been a number of plans developed for the upper Neversink within the New York City watershed, and a few plans down below. DEC has done a management plan that focuses on the units that they own within the Neversink watershed, and then there have been some project-specific plans, such as a plan that George's colleagues at the Nature Conservancy did for the Neversink Reserve property they own on the lower Neversink. What we want to do is incorporate these plans, plus all of the input that you will be providing during the visioning and planning process. Next slide, please. So we will go through a process of eliciting input at a session to be held in person in a couple of months, and we invite people to provide their thoughts on a whole range of things. The economy, the culture, the history, the natural environment, and what we will do is then take those and develop a series of objectives and goals that will guide the entire watershed management planning process. Next slide, please. And sometimes these objectives are overlapping and hard to resolve. I'd like to tell a story about an anecdote that I've heard about the Neversink. I'm not sure it's true, but it's for illustrative purposes, it's good to use. I had heard that there was a community in the middle Neversink that wanted to ritually bathe in the river, but because it's a tailwater, because it's below the reservoir, the water was often way too cold to bathe. And they petitioned the city to decrease the releases. On the other hand, on the right side, we have an image of an old map from some fly fishermen that described the Neversink fishery as basically stopping at Woodburn, up in the Catskills and then down a ways, a little bit below the reservoir, but it never made it much below that. And for the fishermen, they're always looking for more releases to keep the water cold and to extend the range. So, we invite everybody to contribute their thoughts and visions and needs, and we will probably come up with things that are conflicting or contradictory. And part of the process is to try to find ways to either resolve those conflicts or to at least identify them. Next slide, please. So, as we've said, the initial goal of this planning process is to create a multidimensional plan to find what people want within the watershed and then provide a pathway for the planning process and come up with a management plan and a catalog of projects to meet those needs. And we're hoping that the planning process might evolve into the formation of a Neversink Watershed Council comprised of local stakeholders to continue the process of planning and revising the plan as we go forward. So there will be a, thank you, there will be a, next slide. There will be a visioning session in person in 2 months. We'll send out information to everybody. And we'll go through a process of people identifying where they are, what they're interested in, what they'd like to see, any problems that they see, erosion, flooding, sediment control, development, and any opportunities. They'd like to see more hiking and biking and water use, and to find all of the goals and that people within the watershed would like to see incorporated into the plan. Next slide, please. As a prelude to this visioning process, we've created a little, what's called a Padlet, which is an online site where you can go and add your input. And this, what we've modeled this on is a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And so we will be sending out this link. We invite you all to go there and add your thoughts on strengths of the watershed, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And you can be as granular as you want. You can think about the entire watershed, but you can also think about specific places in this exercise. So next slide. Thank you. And now I'll turn it over to Molly to take questions.
Thank you to all of our speakers. That was really great. I don't see any questions that came in the chat box, but I'm happy to, if there are questions, if anyone wants to take themselves off of mute, I'm happy to let people ask questions live. Well, look at that, team. We've done such a good job. We don't have any questions. I just will kind of repeat a couple of things, a couple of themes that I hope came through tonight, and that is, you know, this watershed it crosses municipal boundaries. It involves everyone from landowners to business owners to our municipal leaders and everybody in between. And you know, talking with all of you, engaging everyone to the extent we're able is very important to us. So if there's anything you can do to get more people to the next meeting, or kind of share some of these, you know, presentations with your neighbors, we would greatly appreciate that. And many of the names on here do look familiar, but if you would like to be directly added to our mailing list to be invited to the next meeting, you can send an email either to Heather at the email address that she posted, or you can send one to FUDR, and our email address is just info@fudr.org. And I'll also drop that in the chat box. You can also go on our website. We have a NeverSync page on our website where all of these things will be posted, and there is a way to sign up to be on our mailing list there. So I'm going to drop that. Steve, do you want to talk about your background, your experience?
Sure. My background is I've been involved in conservation and community participatory planning for my entire career. My first adult day job was working for the Trust for Public Land in New York City in the 70s, and did that for a while, and then developed TPL's first headquarters in New York City that was also the home to other organizations, and went on to develop buildings for nonprofits, and internet came along and I went to the dark side. And then when I started spending more time up here on the Delaware, I started getting involved in various conservation activities, and I got involved in the Delaware River Watershed Initiative as the coordinator of the Pocono-Kittatinny Cluster, and have been advocating for a NeverSync Watershed Management Plan and Watershed Council for about the last 10 years. The last picture on my presentation was a Delaware River Watershed tour of the NeverSync Reserve when we were talking about this about 7-8 years ago.
Thank you. Okay, well, if there aren't any other questions, then I think that we are all set for tonight. We thank you so much for joining us. Oh, wait, we do have another one that just came in. So Carol Collier is asking, will you be promoting multi-municipal planning and programs, also integrated watershed management? Let's see, does any one of you want to take that one?
I think that it really sort of depends on the input that we get. Steve did mention, that one of the outcomes could be a coalition that looks over the Neversink to help implement the plan. So the answer is possibly. Why don't you come to the table and help us figure that one out?
All right. Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone. And we hope you'll join us at our next meeting. We'll be in touch through email to let you know more about that. Thank you so much.
Very much. Thank you. Thank you.